The old man sits in a wooden rocking chair. His hands tremble slightly as he holds a coffee mug. The afternoon light comes through the window, illuminating the faded photographs on the wall behind him. He takes a deep breath before beginning. You want to know about the war? Everyone wants to know about the war, but nobody really wants to hear. Not the parts that matter, not the parts that stay with you, that wake you up in the middle of the night 50 years later, sweating cold, screaming a name you never really knew how to spell. But you came here. You came to this old man's house. So I'll tell you. I'll tell you because I need to. Because maybe, if I say it out loud one more time, the weight will get a little lighter. Although I know it won't. He takes a sip of coffee and looks away. At some distant point, only he can see. It was 1988. I was 22 years old, but I felt 1,000. I'd already been in Vietnam for 8 months. 8 months that felt like 8 years. You lose track of time there. The days blend together, heat, mud, fear, the smell of death that sticks to your skin and won't come off no matter how many times you wash. I was a corporal at the time, part of a platoon that ran patrols in a region near Quang Ngai. Small villages, rice paddies, dense jungle, Viet Cong territory or our territory or nobody's, depended on the day, the hour. He closes his eyes for a moment. My mother had given me a Bible before I shipped out, a small Bible that fit in my uniform pocket. She said, "Jimmy, you take God with you, and He'll bring you back home." I carried that Bible every day, but after that day, I couldn't open it anymore. The operation started at dawn. We had intelligence. We always had intelligence that there was a Viet Cong cell operating in a village about 10 kilometers from our base. The mission was simple. Get in, check, neutralize any threat, get out. Simple. He laughs bitterly. Nothing was simple in Vietnam. His hands gripped the mug tighter. It was 6 in the morning when we reached the village. The fog still covered everything, thick as cotton. You couldn't see 3 meters ahead, perfect for an ambush. Every step I took, every breath, I expected the crack of a shot, the click of a landmine. The village seemed abandoned, straw huts, dead fires, chickens scratching in the dirt. But you learn quick there. Silence is suspicious. Silence means something's wrong. My Lieutenant Dawson, a guy from Iowa who barely had fuzz on his face, split us into groups. I was with 3 other soldiers, Rodriguez, a Puerto Rican from the Bronx who always joked about everything, Miller, a white kid from Texas who was only 19, and Jackson, another brother from Detroit who joined the platoon 3 weeks before. He stops, his voice choked, takes another sip of coffee. We were checking the huts one by one. Standard, door, clear the corners, look for weapons, tunnels, anything. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. It was at the 5th or 6th hut that it happened. Rodriguez had just signaled it was clear when we heard it. A sound. Coming from the jungle at the edge of the village, branches breaking, someone running, everyone froze, weapons raised, fingers on triggers, and then he appeared. The old man's voice breaks. He wipes his eyes with the back of his hand. A man, a civilian, Vietnamese, skinny, barefoot, torn clothes. He was running toward us, emerging from the fog like a ghost. And he was screaming. To this day, I don't know what he was screaming. It wasn't English. But the tone was universal. It was pure desperation. It was someone asking for help. He was running straight at me, arms raised, waving. stumbling but continuing. His eyes were wide with terror, and everything happened so fast. He leans forward, elbows on his knees, head down. The radio exploded. Lieutenant Dawson's voice shouting, "Could be explosives. Don't let him get close. Orders are to shoot if he doesn't stop," I shouted. I shouted in English, "Stop! Stop! Dong Lai!" The only word in Vietnamese I knew. But he didn't stop. He kept coming. Maybe he didn't understand. Maybe he was too panicked to understand. 20 meters, 15 meters. Rodriguez beside me was shouting too. Miller's weapon was shaking in his hands. Jackson froze, and I had 1 second, one single second to decide. Tears began to fall down the old man's wrinkled face. He doesn't wipe them away. In my head, in that eternal second, 1,000 thoughts passed. Training. Unidentified threats must be neutralized. Survival. Hesitation gets you killed. Orders. Shoot. But I also saw a frightened man. I saw someone like me. Someone who maybe had family, children, dreams. 10 meters. Lieutenant Dawson screaming on the radio, "Washington, neutralize!" And I fired. Silence. The old man covers his face with his hands. His shoulders shake. 3 shots. 3 shots, center mass, like they taught me. He fell forward less than 5 meters from me. Fell like a rag doll, raising dust. The silence after was worse than any explosion. We approached, weapons still aimed. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold my M16. There was no bomb. There was no weapon. There was nothing. His voice is almost a whisper now. Just a man, a farmer. He had rope marks on his wrists, bruises on his face. He'd escaped from something, maybe from the Viet Cong, maybe from torture. I don't know. He'd seen American soldiers and thought he was saved, and he ran to ask for help, and I killed him. He raises his head, red eyes staring at the camera. We found his family later. A woman, 3 children. The oldest was maybe 7. They came from the jungle when they heard the shots. They saw the body. I'll never forget the sound that woman made. It wasn't a scream. It was something worse. It was the sound of a soul breaking in half. Lieutenant Dawson patted me on the back afterward, said I'd done the right thing, that I'd followed orders, that I'd protected the platoon. But he was wrong. He stands slowly, walks to the window. You know what it's like to carry a death like that? A death that didn't need to happen. A death you caused not because the man was your enemy, but because you were afraid? Because your orders were more important than your humanity. I came back from Vietnam in 1969, physically intact. Mentally, I never came back. Part of me is still in that village on that foggy morning watching that man fall. I tried to talk about it when I got home. My mother didn't want to hear it. My father, who'd fought in World War II, said, "It's war, son. You do what you have to do and move on." My friends avoided me. I was the guy who'd gone to Vietnam, who'd killed people. He returns to the chair, moving as if carrying a great weight. I started drinking, a lot. I spent years drinking to forget, to not see those wide eyes every time I closed mine, to not hear that scream every time there was silence. I lost jobs, I lost relationships, I almost lost my life a few times, not to the enemy, but to myself. It was my wife, Dorothy, God rest her soul, who saved me. She made me get help, therapy, veterans group. It took years, decades, and even then, he touches his chest. Even then, he's still here, that man, That second, that choice. You want to know what the truth about war is? The truth is there's no good and bad. Not when you're there, in the middle, with seconds to decide between living and dying. The truth is that war takes good men and forces them to do terrible things, and then expects them to come home and be normal again. But you can't. You can't be normal again when you carry ghosts. He looks at the photographs on the wall, one of him young, in uniform, a wedding photo, grandchildren smiling. I built a life afterward. Good wife, 3 children, 6 grandchildren. I worked as a mechanic for 30 years. I went to church every Sunday. I tried to be a good man. But every night, before I sleep, I talk to him, to that man I killed. I say I'm sorry, that I wish I could go back, that I wish I'd had more courage, courage to disobey, to risk, to be human instead of soldier. He never answers. But I keep talking. Tears flow freely now. People call me a hero sometimes, for having served, for having fought, and I stay quiet, because how do you explain? How do you say there's nothing heroic about taking an innocent man's life? That real courage would have been lowering the weapon. I was 22 years old, a kid, a black kid from Mississippi who grew up picking cotton, who knew racism, who knew injustice. And yet, when they gave me a gun and sent me to another country, I became part of the machine. I became the oppressor. He breathed deeply, wiping his face. That's why I tell this story. Not to redeem myself. There's no redemption for what I did. But so you understand. So the next generation understands. War isn't glory. It isn't honor. It isn't what you see in the movies. War is having to choose between your humanity and your survival in less than a second, and having to live with that choice for the rest of your life. War is killing a man who's asking for help because you're afraid, and carrying the weight of those 3 shots for 55 years. War is coming home and discovering that the real enemy wasn't out there in the jungle. It was inside you, the fear, the dehumanization, the capacity to pull a trigger when every fiber of your being is screaming not to do it. He looks directly at the camera, eyes tired but steady. If you learn anything from this old man's story, let it be this. Never, ever let anyone convince you that there's such a thing as easy death, necessary death, or justified death. Every death costs something, and war charges the highest price of all, your soul. I killed an innocent man that day. I obeyed orders. I followed my training. I protected my platoon, and I became a murderer. Both things can be true at the same time, and that's the curse I carry. He stands again, walking slowly toward a small dresser. He opens a drawer and removes something, a rusted military medal and the small Bible. This medal they gave me for bravery, for that day and others. I keep it not because I'm proud, but because I need to remember the cost. And this Bible, his voice breaks, this Bible my mother gave me, saying God would bring me back. It brought me back. But God stayed in that village, with that man, with that family. He puts the objects back, closing the drawer gently. You're young. You have your whole lives ahead of you, and I pray, though my prayers aren't worth much, I pray you never have to make the choice I made, that you never know the weight of taking a life, that you never wake up in the middle of the night 55 years later still hearing that scream. But if one day you find yourselves in that situation, if one day war or life puts you in that position. He pauses for a long time. Choose humanity, even if it costs everything, even if it costs your life, because I chose survival, and I survived. But the person I was, that 22-year-old kid who believed in goodness and justice and doing right, he died that day, with that man in the dust. The old man returns to his chair, looking out the window at the yard where grandchildren play in the distance. That's my story, the story I've never fully told anyone, not my wife, not my children. It's the story I carry like a stone in my chest for over half a century, and you know what's worse? What's absolutely worst of all? Tears fall again. I never knew his name. That man I killed, who ran to me asking for help, who died because I was afraid. I never knew his name. And that's maybe the greater sin. Not just taking a life, but not even knowing who it was, reducing him to a threat, to a target, to a 1-second decision. He was someone. He had a name, a story. He loved and was loved, and I took that from him. Long silence. The old man closes his eyes, breathing deeply. So that's it. That's the truth I carry. The day I was forced to shoot someone who asked for help. Thank you for listening, for letting an old man unburden his weight. Now go, live your lives, love your families, and if someone ever comes to you asking for help, help them, no matter the cost. Help them. The camera slowly pulls away as James Washington remains seated in his chair, looking out the window, an 87-year-old man still trapped in a moment that lasted only 1 second, but changed an entire life.